Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for our virtual event with Carl Hiaasen in conversation this evening with Peter J. Solomon. A few quick Zoom housekeeping details before we get started. You are muted, and you will remain muted throughout the duration of the event. For optimal viewing, use your Zoom view functions to select speaker view so that our author is highlighted on your screen. Please ask questions using the chat box function. We will get to as many of your questions as possible. We're behind the scenes monitoring the chat box, so type away. If at any time you drop off the Zoom or experience technical difficulties, simply click the link again to be readmitted. And if you haven't already, please do not forget to purchase a copy of Squeeze Me at rjjulia.com, wesleyanrjjulia.com, or bookhampton.com. You can click on the link in your chat box for quick and easy purchase, or you can visit us in store. We're open for safe, socially distant shopping at all locations. Plus, we have signed copies available. Purchase now to receive your signed book while supplies last. And now, tonight we are joined by Carl Hiaasen and Peter J. Solomon. Carl can brighten even the darkest of days, and Squeeze Me is pure, unadulterated Hiaasen. Irreverent, ingenious, and highly entertaining, Squeeze Me perfectly captures the absurdity of our times. He is the author of 14 previous novels, including bestsellers Razor Girl and Skinny Dip, as well as 6 best-selling children's books. His most recent work of nonfiction is Assume the Worst, a collaboration with the artist Roz. In conversation with Carl this evening is Paul. Oh goodness, was doing so well up until then. Peter J. Solomon is the author of Wasting Time Constructively, A Guide to a Balanced Life. He is chairman of P.J. Solomon. He's currently a director of Monroe Inc. and has served as a director of over 10 public companies. Mr. Solomon has served as co-chairman of New York Governor Andrew M. Cuomo of his Tax Reform and Fairness Commission, and has also served on Governor Cuomo's Council of Economic and Fiscal Advisors and the Spending and Government Efficiency Commission. Expect some big fish stories tonight. Carl and Peter are close friends in Vero Beach who love to go fishing together. And now, without further ado, please welcome Carl Hiaasen in conversation with Peter Solomon.
Hello, Peter.
Carl. Hey, Carl. How you doing?
Good. I lost you. Wait a minute. This screen is doing things.
It's all right. You lose me a lot. Actually, that's not unusual for you.
That's right.
Actually, it's actually a normal day on the water. So, Carl.
Yes.
Carl and I are very good friends. We see each other frequently. We fish together frequently. One day I actually found him on the bottom of a river, which was an experience that neither of us hoped to live again. So, Carl, the first question I have, which is, it's always intrigued me, and I was thinking about it for tonight, is you have these insane characters. They appear, they reappear, they meet, they go their own ways, and then they sort of end up meeting at the end. How do you figure that out? Even in your mind, how do you keep that straight? How do you keep that straight? How do you figure out when they're going to intersect and part, and what happens? How do you do it?
Well, the cold truth is that I don't. I start always every book with sort of a cast of characters in my head that I want to see on a certain stage and have them just bump into each other and see what happens. And I always tell people it's like there's a diving board, and I'm going to jump off the diving board, and I know there's a swimming pool there. I just don't know if there's any water in it or not. I don't plot ahead. I haven't used outlines since, well, I don't want to tell you how many years, because they always felt like handcuffs to me. I like to get surprised by my characters, and I like to be able to get characters off stage if they're not working out, if they're boring me, if they're annoying me. I want to be able to get rid of them. So I envy writers that have everything on the index cards on their cork board, or they have everything plotted out, because I don't know. And the truth is this, I don't know until I'm about 2/3 of the way through a manuscript exactly how it's going to end. I know it's, if you're a musician on a piano, you would know, you want to know this is the chord you're trying to get to. You know what the final chord is going to be. You just don't know the progression. And that's kind of how I work. I know what the note, the last chord is, but I don't know how I'm going to get there or how these people are going to interact. It's a tight wire act, and it's not what any creative writing teacher would approve of. It's chaotic.
And what's your editors say as you go through this? How is that conversation?
They're used to it. I don't, unlike some, I was lucky to be edited for almost 30 years by Sonny Mehta, the amazing head of Knopf, who has a list of writers way more distinguished than I am. And he sort of knew my system. So I would get going on a book and I would send him 5 chapters. That's what my start would be. And I get the droll, inscrutable phone call from Sonny, who would say, yeah, it's fine. I've got a couple questions, but I'm not going to pose them to you because I want you to keep writing. But what about this relationship? Where is it going? And I would say, Sonny, I have no idea. And so finally we're about 20 chapters in and some of it's resolving, but those were the phone calls. He knew what he was dealing with. I mean, he was brave enough to take it on, but I really didn't have a clue. And like I said, the part of the joy, the selfish joy of writing fiction, if you've been a lifetime journalist, is you get to write your own endings. And these are your characters. And if they're bothering you in some way, then they step off a curb and a bus takes them out, and then you move on to the next character.
Or in this case, actually a python. Now, you and I know that the python is the largest snake you've ever contemplated. You want to talk about your relationship to snakes? Yeah, I'm sure the viewers would love to know about.
Oh God! Well, in Squeeze Me, one of the elements, aside from a Trump-like figure who has a winter White House in Florida, I always wanted to get, you know, that the pythons are a serious, real problem in Florida. They've infested the Everglades. They sort of chewed their way through the Everglades, and they get gigantic. They just caught the world record here about 2 weeks ago, Peter. I'm sorry you weren't here for it because it's a sort of
yeah. I'm sorry I missed it actually.
But it was almost 19 feet long, and they have no natural enemies. These Burmese pythons. So, and they've been such a problem, and they're in the news a lot. So I wanted to work them into the novels because I grew up on the edge of the Everglades in South Florida, in western Broward County. And there wasn't anything. We every day get home from school, you get on your bike, you go out in the woods and you catch snakes or raccoons or possum. I had a pet possum for a while. That was my childhood. It's sad but true, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. But I always had snakes. I always collected snakes, and my mother was terrified of them. We'd come home with a pillowcase every Saturday after being out there with a pillowcase full of snakes, and I kind of sort through them. And my poor mother I wouldn't see her for hours at a time. But so I'm comfortable around snakes, but these creatures are surreal. They're big, and they eat anything that can eat a full-grown alligator demands your attention, and these big pythons do. So the premise of this novel was everything that happens in here, it's twisted shit. I'll be the first to tell you that, but nothing is implausible. Everything that happens in this book could actually happen in real life. So I thought, well, they're moving north out of the Glades. They've been turning up in western Palm Beach County, and they can swim. Why not the island? Why not Mar-a-Lago? I mean, part of it's wishful thinking. I'm going to confess to that, but I thought, would the Secret Service be prepared? And is there any training that goes on at their training center that deals with a 20-foot snake that eats everything in its path? And I'm thinking probably not. So
no, they don't deal with the Senate.
In these particular times, with everything is happening in the country, I didn't have to work very hard to go down that dark road. I mean, I just thought, why not? I wrote this novel. They're going to show up in Palm Beach. These snakes are someday, and I wrote this novel for everyone who can't be there when it happens.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So you and I go to Palm Beach occasionally. It's us,
we do.
You know, country folks going down to see everybody. I am sorry I didn't go to the IBS actually the gala. That would have been great. For those who haven't read the book, that's the irritable bowel syndrome, gala that Carl and I usually go to, but this year we missed it. Buffett usually performs there, so that's why we go. I think it was really bad of Jimmy not to go this year. You probably scared him away.
But you have Peter knows this for a fact. You know the winter schedule, the social schedule down there, which is sort of, this book is set sort of post-pandemic, and there's references. I mean, they have Waterford Crystal hand sanitizers at Casa Bellicosa, which is the fictional president's mansion down there. But Peter knows that this season, the winter season down there is hectic, and everybody competes for these charitable events for various disorders and diseases. And I don't know if there's one for irritable bowel syndrome, but I thought there ought to be.
Definitely ought to be, yeah, because enough people have that syndrome there.
Especially after the last 4 years.
You know, one of the things, it's really interesting. This book is a book of satire.
Right.
You know, I was trying to figure out what's the difference between lampooning and satire, but I think this is a book of satire. And did you mean it to be, did you think of yourself as a satirist? As
I always have. I mean, the newspaper sometimes its columns are satirical, sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're heavy. But the novels, they're always supposed to be funny. And I think all satire, all good satire it comes from a sense of anger and injustice about something. I think the difference between satire and lampooning is I think satire has a sharper edge. And if you get to the root of why it was written, it was written because you had a sense that this is wrong, and the best way to deal with, the most effective way. And the thing, you always have a target in satire, and it doesn't have to be Trump. It could be anything. It could be racial injustice. There's an element about the immigration policy in this book, in Squeeze Me. And even though certain scenes are told in a humorous way, there's a grim tone to some of it because the policies have been harsh. But I think I couldn't write these books if I was a well-adjusted, happy human. I don't.
Well, I can attest to that.
Yeah, no, I think you have to have something simmering and angry to make it funny. Does that make sense? I always tell people I have the coolest readers, and they've been loyal all these years. And the thing that I like about them when I hear from them is that they're laughing for the right reason. And that's what matters when you write satire. Not that they're laughing, because you're not writing slapstick. They're getting the jokes. And it isn't one-liners. They're getting the whole scene, and they're laughing for the right reasons. And that's why I feel so lucky to have loyal readers after this many years of doing this, because a lot of writers, it doesn't work out that way. So I feel really happy about that. And the response to this book has been exceptional, but I think it's also the time we're living in and the sort of the fever pitch of the divided politics that we're having too.
I must say in this book, there are times that and in all your books, I mean, Raise a Girl, and all of them, where I just laugh out loud. There are just scenes that are just hysterical. And it's a book that, and that's one of the great appeals for it in this period of insanity. I also, I of course love Stink. You always end up Stink. I always wonder who exactly, I mean, the current governor, we could certainly lampoon a lot. But who was the original inspiration for
the Stink? I get asked that a lot, Peter, and it's interesting because that character is a former governor of Florida who just went nuts, crazy in Tallahassee, and just went running naked from the governor's mansion one day. And he was an honest guy who got elected, never been in politics before, and he was just overwhelmed by the corruption in Tallahassee. And I think it's a normal reaction. You rip off your clothes and you run into the swamp, and that's what he did. He lives off roadkill. He was first in a book I did, and this was dating myself, I think it was 87, called Double Whammy, which was a book about the corruption on the bass fishing circuit. And it was literary territory I had completely to myself. I was waiting for Cheever or Updike or someone to do a bass fishing novel, and I just stepped into that void. And originally Skink, I needed a hermit guy in like chapter 5 or whatever. It was just supposed to be a walk-on. You know, my character's running through the woods, and I just needed a hermit guy. So I gave him this backstory. And I had him living off of roadkill because I had clipped an article about a state trooper up in Pennsylvania who was like Officer Roadkill, they called him. Every time anything died on a highway anywhere, he would show up and collect it. He had a walk-in freezer at home. Nothing got wasted. And I admired the dedication there. So I just weaved that in. And then this is what I was talking about earlier about when characters surprise you. In that novel, I remember, it was only the second book I'd ever written by myself. And all of a sudden, Skink starts doing and saying things that I wished I had done or said. And he just took off, and he became, in a weird way, I don't know how it's the moral compass or the moral center of that strange book. And I decided at the end of the book that I wanted to know more about him. And so I brought him back for several other novels because I just wasn't done. Most of the characters I would just rather say goodbye to. But that's one character. In this case, because of the stakes, and the stakes are high right now for all of us, let's face it. And because there was the Python and the Everglades element, and that's where sort of Skink lives as a hermit on a tree island out in the Everglades. So I thought, well, he's got to make an appearance in this novel. I don't want to say too much about when and where he shows up, but it was good to have him back. He's old, like, you know, he's old, he's hobbling around a little bit, but so am I. So, you know, what the hell?
I do.
I'm not hearing you right now. Hang on, man.
I hear me now.
Oh, now, yeah, I got you now. Sorry.
Okay. I do like the way, and I think I can reveal this detail, how he incubates an iguana in his eye.
In his eye socket.
I mean, that's a really interesting. Yeah, in his eye socket. Where did you get the inspiration for that?
Well, I tell you,
some of the golf clubs we play at.
Yeah, he loses early in the book I just mentioned. Skink loses his eye in a very grim episode, and so he's not a conventional guy, so he's not going to get a regular prosthetic eye, and he usually takes eyes out of stuffed animals and has it in there just for cosmetic purposes. But in this case, there's an iguana egg. We have an iguana infestation also in South Florida. You know this too, and especially in Palm Beach County, is crawling with these things.
I know, and really weird looking ones too.
Yeah, and they're not good. They eat everything.
The Egyptian iguanas. I think they're the Egyptian iguana, actually.
I don't know where they're from. The other thing that they do, which everyone is really happy about, is if you have a swimming pool, they will poop in it. An iguana will come for miles just to take a dump in your swimming pool. So,
really, even in Palm Beach, they're allowed to do that?
Well, yeah. Well, they infiltrate, and so so the eggs was something. But this is a true story. Dave Barry, who is a dear friend of mine, a great humorist, and was the Herald for so many years. When he and his wife got married, this is, I don't know, 23, 24 years ago, my wedding gift to him was an egg. It was just an egg. It was a reptile egg. And I didn't tell him what it was. And he opens it. He goes, oh my God, Dave's not a reptile guy, you know? And he goes, what? And I said, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to tell you one thing, buy a cage. And,
geez, I'm glad Susan and I didn't invite you to our wedding.
It was an iguana egg, but guess what? His wife, Michelle, whom I love, decided she didn't want the drama of seeing what was coming out of this egg. This is a true story, by the way. So she just one day, she just put it in the freezer.
Really?
So the iguana gave his life for a good story that Dave and I have to tell now.
At least she didn't serve as an omelet.
That's what that's
that's going to be in your next.
You would have done that. That would have been iguana eggs Benedict.
Yeah. The other thing that's always interesting about your character, and in this case,
I lost you again, Peter. There's a little phase out. I didn't hear that question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I do now.
Am I back in?
You're back in.
You usually have a woman who's a hero or a heroine or anti-hero or some role, an important role. always a sympathetic role. In this case, it's Angie Armstrong. Now,
Yeah.
I know that what you'd really like to be doing, if you could really make a living from it, was doing what she does.
That's
I mean,
right.
I describe a little what she does for those folks who haven't read the book yet.
In Florida, even though we have 22 million people here now, almost everybody who lives here has some interaction with wildlife. We have a lot of critters everywhere. So there are these companies in every single county that if you have a raccoon, living in your piano or something, you call them up, they come and they capture the animal and they relocate it somewhere wild. And so Angie runs one of these wildlife removal services. In fact, I saw here at Vero, Peter, I saw a truck just yesterday as somebody down the street had some issue and they had one of these trucks there. It's a business that's dominated mostly by men. And there really isn't any reason for it, because anybody who knows what they're doing can, or who wants to, can go capture these critters. But I wrote this, when I started the book, I wrote about 60 pages and the main character was a man. And I thought, why? It would be so much, I'd have so much more fun. There's so many more plot possibilities. So I went back and redid it and sort of created Angie, and I fell for her right away. And she's strong and she's sharp and she had a very interesting backstory. And every time she was on the page, it was fun for me. And that's usually the way it is with the sort of the female leads in my novels. They're always 2 or 3 steps ahead of the male characters, which you and I will both attest to is true in our real lives. Yes.
Generally true. So what reactions have you had? Have you received a lot of invitations for the coming season in Palm Beach? Are we going to be going down there?
I never got a lot of those anyway. No, I don't know here's the thing. I actually have no idea I mean, I know that the book's doing well, but I don't read the reviews, and I don't. And Indian River County is, as you know, Trump country, but I haven't been accosted in any way. My tires haven't been slit.
But you are wearing a mask, remember?
I do wear a mask. But yes, I do wear a mask out. But I don't. I think the reaction has been pretty good. I know that people who love Trump aren't. Let's just face it. They're not necessarily going to like the book. But one of my best friends is a lifelong Republican up in Pensacola, which is really red, part of the state up there. And he sent me a text and he said, "Hey man, I laughed my ass off. It was funny." So he had a good sense of humor about it, but he has a good sense of humor. But I think some people don't have any sense of humor. And to them, I say, if they picked up this book expecting something else, Peter, they haven't been paying attention. Because
no, I think, yeah.
What I say in my columns, and also, here's the other thing. You go into a bookstore, either Bookhampton or R.J. Julia, buy this book and you look at the flap jacket and you read the copy about what it's about. You're not going to be surprised. If you do all that and you're still surprised, then there's I hate to say it, some sort of cognitive issue there, because it tells you what the book is about.
Yeah, it does indeed.
So
there's no ambiguity.
No ambiguity, but I mean, it's hard. Listen, I've been writing this opinion column in the Herald since 1985, and if I wanted to be universally beloved, I would have been in another line of work. If you're doing your job as a newspaper columnist, you're pissing somebody off. So I'm used to it, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, but you don't get into this business to truly to be a person that all people love. I mean, I'm just not that guy,
Well, that's because they don't know you.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but.
So let me ask you another question, which this is part of. So you publish a book today. All of us are dealing with Zoom and remote. Yeah. You're used to doing something you love to do, which is going around the country, flying on planes.
Yeah.
For those of you who are listening, and if you ever have the chance to get on a plane with Carl Hiaasen, Don't take the train. Take the train. It's not, the experience is not really worth it.
Not a good, not a good.
So how have you dealt with the promotion and the connection with your book by Zoom? You've probably liked it because you haven't had to go on a plane.
I'll be honest with you. I don't miss the travel at all. I don't miss being away from home at all, but I do miss the only reason that tours are fun is when you get to the event itself every night. Now, you may not remember which city you're in, but at least you're talking with the readers, and it's fun, and you get to meet them, and that part I miss, the face-to-face, signing books for them, and all that I do miss it. And but I mean, this is way better than no contact at all, but it isn't the same. But everybody is in the same boat, and we got to be safe and well first, and then worry about the rest of it. But I know you probably don't believe this, but I actually do miss the events. The events were the one thing that kept you going from city to city on a long book tour. Was you had that event at night, you go back to your hotel, you have a hamburger, and you're kind of on a high because you got to meet all these great people. And now the Zoom thing is a little clinical. It's like telemedicine. It's like I feel like you're my dermatologist. You want to see? Yeah, I've got this.
I actually don't. Could you back away from the camera? No close-ups.
No close-ups. No.
So, what's your next book going to be?
I alternate between the grown-up books and the books for young readers. And
which one was this?
This one is not for middle school, I would say. Squeeze Me is a grown-up book, but so I've started another book for kids, and how just superstitious I am. I don't talk about it, but I've started it, and there's no pressure at this point. I mean, I'm going to have fun with it. It's a nice change of pace. I can keep the same sort of snarky attitude, and just obviously the language is. And it's easy because the main characters are kids, so you're not in the world. Like I always tell people, it's the great thing about writing these kids books is you can hit the ground running with the characters, and you don't have a backstory to explain why some character has 4 divorces and a meth habit. You don't have to deal with that.
Oh, you mean the normal Florida person?
These young kids who just hit the ground with all this energy, and so it's a good change of pace.
Well, I think this was great. We should probably take some questions. Catherine, or who's going to ask questions?
All right, I'm back.
Okay.
So we've got quite a few questions from our audience, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But I did want to start with kind of our standard bookseller question. Carl, what have you been reading in quarantine, and what would you recommend other than Squeeze Me, of course?
Well, this is it's interesting because I was writing all the way up until May on this book. It had a very fast turnaround because they wanted it out before the election, because of the character who vaguely resembles the president, I guess. But they wanted the book out, so I didn't. All during that period, the early part, the toughest part of the lockdown and all that, I was writing. And when I'm writing, I don't read any fiction. I don't read very much at all. I mean, I'm just being honest. I read the Times, and I read about 5 newspapers a day, online. But I consciously don't read fiction. So now that I'm done with it, I'm just starting to. I was finished in May, but I've been getting caught up. I get a lot of manuscripts sent to me of books that aren't out yet. And then I was able to go back. Karen Russell's got a great book of short stories, and she's one of my favorites. I had the pleasure. Nick Hornby's got a new novel coming out, and I did an event with him a couple of weeks ago, and I love his stuff. So I mean, I got an advance. I was lucky, get an advance copy of that. But I have not been doing. I mean, I'm sort of picking out the stuff that piled up on my book stand, and then I've been doing a fair amount of research on the new kids book, which is not exciting reading. It's some historical stuff, and it's just picking books here and there to read, because the book is going to be set in Key West, And as much as I know and I love the Keys, there's a lot of things I don't know. So I'm reading some old stuff on that. But again, the trouble is, it's just a reflex I have that I don't want to unconsciously absorb the style of another writer as much as I might love their work. And not that that would happen, but there is an echo effect if you're not careful. Even the pacing of a novel, a character, I just have this, if I'm reading anything, it's going to be completely different from anything that I would write myself. Here's one thing I read. I don't know if this is politically okay, but I read Woody Allen's autobiography was one thing I read, and I read it for a lot of different reasons. Curious about not only his version of what happened, but his as a writer, as someone that. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, my dad, Woody Allen, was doing stand-up. And my dad drove me down to the Deauville Hotel in Miami. I'd never been any place like that, and see him doing stand-up. But part of my interest in that was the comic element, because people who are humorous by profession interest me, because many cases they don't necessarily live tranquil and happy lives, and all of us have ups and downs, but it's interesting to me. When I was a kid, here's what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to grow up and write for Johnny Carson. I know that sounds crazy. Johnny Carson, especially during Watergate and those, Peter remembers when the Carson monologue, in those days there was not that many TV. If you didn't watch Carson at night, you didn't know what the mood of the country was. And of course he had a huge stable of writers and everything, but I was always interested in the ability to get up in front of people, and just the timing of those lines and everything. So that's why I looked at Woody Allen's book. I don't know him at all or anything, but I was just curious about how the craft of what he does, and also about obviously the terribly serious allegations and stuff. So I just bounce around to nonfiction like that.
Absolutely. And so you talked a little bit about how writing and how reading fiction and any genre influences and doesn't influence your own craft, which leads pretty nicely into the next question of what advice do you have for any writers out there, aspiring writers in any genre?
Well, it all sounds kind of trite when you say it, but it's true, is that you just keep writing. It is wall after discouraging wall when you start out. I used to, Peter, when I started, I would collect my rejection slips. Like I was young, I was in school, I was sending stuff off to the New Yorker and places like that, and Esquire and places and of course and I just saved all of them. But it was discouraging. And I would write humor pieces that I thought were hilarious, and I would probably cringe to look at them now. But I just kept at it, and you kept going, and it's hard to tell young writers because right now the publishing world, like the newspaper world, is scaled way back, and there's not. When I started writing books, you could send a manuscript to 12 or 14 different publishers, if you were trying to get published. And now all the imprints are gathered under certain houses, and they don't tend to compete necessarily among themselves. It's harder to get published, especially for new writers. I still believe if you got talent, you will eventually get discovered and get published, because there still is a tremendous hunger for new talent among editors out there. And I think it'll happen, but not if you stop writing, or not if you get discouraged. You just got to keep at it and believe in yourself. And it's not a normal way to make a living. It's lacerating to the ego on a regular basis. And even when you're lucky enough to have a book published, there's that period of, is it going to be okay or not? And did it sell enough for you to get that second contract or that third contract? And you're talking about what pays the rent and what pays the water bill. You're not talking about, oh, this is found money, I'm going to go to St. Bart's. You're talking about supporting yourself on this. I was lucky because I decided from an early age that I also loved newspaper work, and that was going to be my steady job. And I went to work in a newsroom, and when I was 21 years old, and I still get a newspaper paycheck every week. I have not gotten courageous enough to after all this time to walk away. I still got the same insurance plan I had. It's true.
So does the deadly seriousness of our current political climate make satirizing it for humor more difficult?
Horribly difficult. It's very, very difficult because, and when I was writing this book, the presidential character was referred to only by a Secret Service nickname, which is Mastodon. And obviously there's some resemblance to Trump, although my character drinks Dr. Peppers and Trump drinks Diet Cokes. But not only are the stakes so high, but I would write a scene that I thought, even for me, and I am really a warped son of a bitch. I'll be the first to say, I wrote a scene, or I wrote a speech, I wrote some dialogue that I thought was way out there. And then you pick up, next day you're looking through the papers and you see something he said at a rally or something he said to a reporter. And you're going, okay, I wish I had thought of that for the satirical novel, because you would never think those words would come out of an adult human being sitting in the Oval Office. So the challenge is, how do you keep up with somebody who is not only larger than life, but who is he has such a gaseous nature that it never stops. So you can't rest. Whatever you invent for him to do in the novel, he's really going to do it. So how do you stay ahead? And I was a constant source of anxiety for me. I mean, I just you just pray. It was satire. You're trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit. You're trying to ratchet up with the reality enough, and it's very difficult. It has been for the last 4 years to how do you, as a satirist, just strictly for satirical material, how do you improve on this cast of characters in the White House? If Jonathan Swift were alive, what do you think he would make of Jared and Ivanka and Stephen Miller? I mean, he'd be doing the same thing I do, which is, oh my God, how we couldn't have created this person, and there they are.
And so in thinking about what you consider funny, is your standard for funny whether you laugh at your own? Do you laugh at your own jokes?
Never have, never will.
So then do you get feedback from your editor or from others?
The people that read my manuscripts in progress are my agent, Esther Newberg. I've been with since 1979, and my editor. In this case, it was Sonny and then Peter Gethers, who did a great job. When Sonny passed away suddenly, but I don't bounce it off of people. Peter knows this. I'm superstitious. I'm paranoid. I'm probably the most insecure person ever about this stuff. But I know in my head when I'm writing something, whether that section of a chapter is working, whether it's funny, but I'm not laughing. And Dave Barry and I talk about this. It is grim work, because if you write something funny and one adverb is wrong, one adjective is wrong, a piece of dialogue is flat, doesn't connect, it kills it. So every single beat has to be right. So you're not laughing, but there's a part of your brain, a mechanism that goes, oh yeah, that's funny, that works. That's what I was trying to do. But I've said this to Peter before. I walk out of the office every day looking like I just left a funeral. That's how I look. And it might have been a chapter that everyone else thought was hilarious. I'm just exhausted and whipped by the whole thing.
He's not fun when he's writing. It's definitely true. And he gives you I see him all the time. He gives you no sense of what the plot is or where he's going. I wonder every day whether he actually knows it. As he says, I'm not sure he does know where it's going, but you certainly have no sense. You have dinner that night, you have no sense of where it's going.
Well, here's the thing, that if you're a kind of a basket case like I am, your fear would be talking to a good friend and saying, here's what I wrote today, here's the setup, and here's the scene, and have them do, as Peter's very capable of doing, going, that's not funny. And then you're crushed, and I'm destroyed for weeks. I'm lying in my office in a fetal position, moaning. So it's a cowardly thing that I do, which is I don't tell anybody what I'm doing.
Well, then I won't try to get any more secrets out of you about future projects then. But I wonder if you would say anything more about any thoughts or anything in the pipeline about another movie.
Well, you know, there are always things floating around, and there's certainly interest in this book, although to me it hasn't let's hope it has an expiration date. But my agent will kill me for saying that, so there's always stuff floating. And I've got somewhere in this office two boxes full of scripts that have been written based on my novels, and only 2 have been made into movies. And some of the scripts are very, very good, and some of them are not great. And I do have nothing but sympathy for the screenwriters that try to convert, as Peter's already pointed out, the rather loose structure of my novels, try to convert that to 3 acts, which is what every screenplay is. It's 3 acts, about 100 pages, maybe 110 pages. So you're taking a manuscript which could be 425 pages, and you're boiling it down. And so much of the humor in the novels that I write is in the narrative tone. It isn't, some of the scenes are inherently funny, but it isn't, like I said, slapstick. So without a narrator, without a voice, and there are not many movie makers who can do that. The Coen brothers can do that. But it is a really tough chore. Mike Nichols could do it. It's hard. And so I have nothing but sympathy for them, but I don't get caught up in it. And the truth is that I know I should be more excited about these deals, but it's been at this game a long time. And I wish them well, good luck. I hope the screenplay's great. Nowadays, the big thing is writing these limited series for HBO, Showtime, you know, and Hulu and all that. And great, good luck. I'll give you all the help I can. But I don't. If you get writers, I know writers who've gotten so caught up in it that they write the next novel as a screenplay in their head instead of as a novel. It's like, I want to be able to sell this to the movies and make a whole lot of money, and that's great. But then it really damages the craft of what you should be doing, which is concentrating on the book and let the professional screenwriters deal with the rest. And everybody's always nice, and Hollywood they're as nice as they can be to you, and you go, and it's just great, and the checks usually clear, so you're okay. But if you get wrapped up in it, it's not good. It's not good for a novelist.
Yeah, and they are, and to your point, very, very distinct crafts.
Yeah, so different.
So different. And so still on the sort of vein of the craft of writing, an interesting question. You spoke of getting rid of a character if they're bothering you. Do you ever think about bringing them back in a different plot or a different book? Or are they?
Yes. And there was a funny story. I did a novel one time, and I forget which novel it is, but the whole thing's done. Halfway through it, Sonny Mehta says to me, I really like this character, but he doesn't belong in this novel. And I said, oh, I think he does. He fits here. And I wish I could remember which one it was. He goes, nah, I don't think he does. But here's what you do. Finish the manuscript and give me more. I want to know more. I want this, and this. And we'll talk about it in another, 250 pages, 200 pages, whatever. So at the end of the day, I finish. I do everything he wanted me to do. I turn the manuscript in, and we have a lot of other things to discuss. And he says, it just, you need to think about taking this character out. And this is a hard thing to do after you've got plot points wherever the character appears. It's like, I tell people, it's like going through a desert with a palm frond, erasing your footprints in it, because not only do you have to take the character out, you have to take out every reason that he was in every scene and assign that role to somebody else. And it's a giant pain in the ass, in other words, is what it is. But he was dead right. So I took that character out. I thought he was hilarious in whatever book it was. And then I ended up using him. I didn't throw him away. I have so few good ideas, Peter knows, that I hoard them. And I couldn't dispense of this character. And so the next kids book I did, I brought the character into the kids book. And the kids book was called Chomp, and the title was suggested to me by my granddaughter, who had said, you know, you wrote Hoot, you wrote that. Why don't you write a book called Chomp? Chomp would be cool. That was the whole idea. That was it. I said, you know, if I can't write a book for my granddaughter, then I don't belong in this business. So I did that book, and I brought this character. His name was Derek Badger. He was one of these. He was like kind of Bear Grylls kind of guy. You know, the outdoorsman. He had his own TV show, and he was a complete phony. Anyway, I saved all the stuff from the adult book, and I wove it in, and I just shamelessly recycled it, and it worked much better. And that Sonny was absolutely right, and that was the second time he'd done that to me, and both times it was absolutely right. And it's a hard thing for after you've built, especially at the end of a manuscript, to say, was having someone say, you know, that what is that person doing in this book? And you go, oh crap, you gotta take it out. But yeah, I mean, that's part of what good editors do.
Sure. Well, and there's so much that goes into good character building that I'm sure to have to let them go is maybe a little bit difficult.
It is, and there are characters who disappoint you. I'll tell the story. I was lucky enough to be friends with Elmore Leonard, and I did a book event with him many, many years ago down in Fort Lauderdale, where my hometown. And he got up, and you know, he had these fanatical fans. He wrote a jillion books, and they knew every line of every novel. And I got to say, the Dutch remembered some of what he had written. He didn't remember everything because he wrote so much. He was just incredibly productive. So he was very nice, gentlemanly, and someone raised it, Mr. in La Brava, why did you kill off so-and-so in chapter 7? And he was at the lectern, and he looks around and goes, oh, he said, I killed him off because he was boring me. And I figured if he was boring me, he was going to be boring the readers too. That was his literary explanation. And that's all you need to know.
Noted. So I want to bring Peter back for our last question if he's still on. But before that, I did want to pass on one note from an audience member thanking you, Carl, for having a kick-ass female protagonist. Oh,
well, that's, you know, I always fall for those. I don't know. Yeah, I've been lucky in my life to know.
I'm on here.
Where is he? Where is he hiding?
I got a little nervous that he dropped off there.
Anyway, I have.
I think I'm back on. Am I back on?
You're back, Peter.
Am I back on?
Yes.
Yeah. Internet service. You know, he can't do anything right. He might a satire about de Blasio. I mean, you really got to come to New York, and there's enough here for you.
It sounds terrifying. Actually, not terrifying, but you know, I'll tell you a funny story. Last year, at some point, well, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, our governor at the time was celebrating the fact that Florida had passed New York State in population. This was a sad day for those of us of my generation, just because it's gotten so big. But he was celebrating. And then someone did a story comparing the number of people who had left New York State with the increase in Florida's population over the same period of time. And wouldn't you know it, the numbers balanced out. And so when Trump officially declared that he's now Florida man and he changed residency, he was just one more in the influx, you know, that the people that but here's the great thing for a writer's point of view is that they have this great common experience now of sharing the New York experience and then the Florida experience, both of which are extreme in their own ways.
Well, we're really glad he's in Florida now. Incidentally, I can only speak for me, but I think it's.
I know, because you can walk to the office without having the Secret Service hassle you.
That's absolutely correct.
That's the only reason you care about them. Just
that is correct. That's correct. It's all self-interest. Actually, the Secret Service is still there. He isn't there, but the Secret Service is there.
Melania is there quite a bit, is what I'm told.
I don't. She's campaigning in Pennsylvania at the moment. So,
gosh, that's that's an electrifying thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that actually. Anyway, do we have other questions?
We do. So before we wrap up, our final question for the two of you, Carl and Peter. You two seem to be old friends. What's the funniest thing that's happened when you two were together?
Oh, God.
Watching Hiaasen, actually, Carl Hiaasen's one of the great fishermen. One of the funniest times I've ever spent is with Carl Hiaasen in the Bahamas, watching him catch no fish.
That's right. I got skunked that day.
Yeah, that was.
Find it all that.
That was a highlight.
I don't seem to remember laughing all that much, but
that was a highlight. Somehow, the humor of that escaped him at the moment, but I thought it was great moment.
We've had great times on the boat. This is the kind of fishing that Peter and I do, which is fly fishing, and you're usually on a small boat. There's only a select number of people you can stand to be with. If you're on a 16-foot skiff with a 20-knot wind and someone's with a fly rod in front of you, and a bad cast takes your ear off, there's only, we're very snobby about who we go fishing with. So the fact that we've been friends for so long and we can still get on the same boat and still be friends at the end of the day is no small thing.
Or another. And it's great to have him. It's great to do this Zoom with him. It's good to see him. And I appreciate everybody joining us today. It was fun for me.
I just wanted to thank everybody and thank the bookstores
and even though my Zoom is not working.
Yeah, I don't know where you are. Do you have like titanium in the walls of your place so that you're keeping out the beam?
I have terrific service. I've even moved from room to room to room. I've moved to room, and it's. Susan just walked out. She's giving me instruction to everybody to run out and buy the book.
Oh, no! Oh my God! Now don't. Yes. You guys are very nice to do this.
It is really funny. It is really funny. And hopefully next week it will be funnier.
I'll just tell you one more story. At some point someone said, aren't you nervous about doing a book where there's, a very timely political aspect of this, and you have this one character who literally might conceivably be voted out of office and who cares? And I said, I would give up. I would quit right now if you told me that that's how the election was going to turn out. I would give back the advance. I would tell my editor I'm starting over. I would have done if I thought in my Norwegian mind that would have had some sort of jinx effect. Don't think I wouldn't have done it. But also, the other Norwegian philosophy is that we refuse to be optimistic, and that's sort of my outlook on everything.
If you didn't otherwise get that from this interview, this conversation. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks to everybody. Thank you. Thanks, all. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Peter, for joining us.
Vote. We all voted here. We all voted. I must say the voting has been extraordinary. I voted last week. The amount of voting has been unbelievable.
Here too.
It's great.
Too. It's phenomenal.
Definitely. Everyone get out.
Stay well.
All of
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Stay well. Be safe up there.
Bye, Peter. Thank you for joining us from your
Bye. Be well, Carl.
Carl, thanks for joining us this evening. And
pleasure.
A final reminder to everyone to purchase Carl's newest book, Squeeze Me, on sale at RJ Julia, Wesley and RJ Julia, and Bookhampton. Thank you all again for joining us this evening.
Bye, everybody.